What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Shoeing with Jude, episode 6, part 2. The other Hall of Famer, talking to Pat Reilly, Horseshoeing Hall of Famer. We are at the new vet school down in New Jersey, in Glassboro, New Jersey, Rowan University, Shreiber School of Veterinary Medicine. Part 2, we are talking about laminitis. In fairness to Pat, he is not a veterinarian, so there were a couple of questions he deferred to a veterinarian. I think the clinic that I went to a few months back, I wanted to give owners, horse people, sort of lay explanation. Pat, in his previous duties at New Bolton Center, University of Pennsylvania, did see a lot of laminitis, from what I understand, a lot of clinical cases he dealt with. So I asked him some questions, things for owners to look for, how it presents itself, potential things that couldn't be done prior to a veterinarian arriving, some of the care and management expectations. So part 2 covers that. I think also in the end, we circle back a little bit, talk about some education related stuff, and just recap the whole conversation. So, really great. Getting to go to see the vet school is amazing. Um, Significant amount of money has been expended to put New Jersey on the map insofar as vet schools. Again, I believe part 1, Pat might have shared. If he didn't, really the impetus, the catalyst is there is a deficiency in the states currently for veterinarians. Um, Up until this point, if you were a New Jersey state resident and you wanted to go to vet school, you had to travel out of state, if not internationally. This provides an opportunity for New Jersey state residents interested in pursuing veterinary school. Here's an opportunity with in-state tuition, which I think, saves people quite a few bucks. So great interview, great being with Pat, great getting to see the facility down there. He took me on a really awesome tour. He's up and running, teaching, I think doing some clinical cases out in the field. So great interview. Appreciate you guys, as always, stopping by, watching the program. Please like and subscribe. Quick program notes with the holidays, which I wish everybody a very happy holiday, happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays, happy New Year. I have a ton of video. We'll probably put up a bunch of supplemental video, which is mostly horsepower related, covering the Montreal Grand Prix that I attended, some of my experiences, the 83 911 project, the status of that, Drive to Survive. I interviewed a few people with some cool cars, a Farriery F430, a very unique BMW M2. I had gone to a Wings and Wheels um, car event, car show, not really a car show, I guess it is a car show event here in New Jersey, Wall, New Jersey. I took the Green Monster, the Green Machine out. Um, it was an interesting experience. I have a buddy that's in the car industry, actually interviewed his son, fourth generation in car sales, talks about some of the things that people should keep in mind when they're looking at cars, etc. So got a lot of that video content that we're going to be putting up in supplemental videos. And then beginning of the year, probably revamp a little bit, look at some of the analytics, and really determine what people like, what people don't like as I get closer to doing some of the research projects in the new year. More input, more information on that type of stuff, the future projects, and how people like yourselves, people with horses that are watching, can help me with this particular project. So a lot of good stuff coming. I appreciate everybody being here and watching, and hope you enjoy this next part with Pat Reilly. Thanks for stopping by. See you next time. See you next year. Pat, in layman's terms, can you talk about, when a horse is diagnosed with laminitis, what that means, what's happening?
Yeah, the most simple way that I explain it to clients is that the bone is actually suspended inside the horse's foot. So the easiest way to think of it is there's insensitive lamina that lines the inside of the hoof capsule, which is basically just a big fingernail that grows around the end of the digit. And the other half of that Velcro-like attachment, that lamina, is on the top of the bone, and the bone is hanging inside the foot. When a horse develops laminitis, that really tight bond, which really shouldn't fail and doesn't fail in normal horses, dissolves, and now the bone displaces and moves inside the foot. Obviously, it's more complicated than that, right? There's an inflammatory process, and once the horse actually goes through and that lamina separates and the bone moves inside the foot, now we're actually dealing with chronic laminitis. But that's what most people are referring to, is not just inflammation in the foot, but it's actually the displacement of the bone inside the foot.
What could possibly trigger? Are there things that trigger?
There are all kinds of things. And actually, this is one study came out and said that most, even in university settings, you only find the cause of that about 50% of the time. We're doing, and I think, Andrew Van Epps was one of the researchers I worked with at Penn, is probably doing some of the most, progressive stuff at understanding what's causing that lamina to fail at a metabolic and at a cellular level. There are other things that cause it. There can be mechanical components. If you have a horse, we used to call it road founder. We have very few horses that actually work this hard on roads,
Right.
that in itself causes that failure of that laminitis. But you can have a horse, if they break a leg on one side, now they're standing with all their weight on the other side. That lends to some metabolic demand changes and circulatory changes in the foot, which can lend to laminitis. There are more and more different types of metabolic diseases that take place and different diet and changes that take place, all of which is fine. And it's, they're making progress with it, but it's still the number 2 leading cause of death in horses. From my end, I figure my part of this, role on this as a team is my job is to consider the mechanical ways of adjusting or treating this. And there are really only very few things that we can do. And bluntly, I don't think any of them work well enough. Laminitis has for centuries been the 2nd leading cause of death in horses. And we actually know that it's not a new disease. I mean, going all the way back through the fossil records, there's evidence of laminitis in equids. We know that every hoofed animal develops something similar in some ways, whether it's cows or deer or goats, they will all develop some form of laminitis. So I don't want you to think that this is something that is solely farrier, based on the modern equine experience. This is something that's happened forever. We just need to figure out ways of our ways of addressing this. What is the most ideal way of doing it? I don't consider myself to be an expert on laminitis. I consider myself to be really experienced with lots of things that sometimes work and sometimes don't. But if I were an expert in laminitis, I could hold it up and say, my horses are getting better at rates, exceeding other farriers, and we just don't have that information.
Yeah.
We all have ideas of what to do about it, but my suspicion is that this is a problem that is going to have to be cured at a cellular level, and the mechanical component of it, our ability to put a shoe on, bluntly, if we are addressing this by putting something on the bottom of the foot, the weight's already traveled down through the bony column, passed through that lamina to the hoof by the time it gets to the ground. And if it were so simple as putting a different orthotic on or trimming the foot in a different way, we would have solved that, 1,000 years ago. I suspect it's going to be a much more complicated part of the disease process. Now, that doesn't mean that farriers don't have a really important role to play in there.
Right.
Because I think addressing some of the distortion in the hoof capsule, some of the misalignment of the sensitive and sensitive structures of the foot as the horse rotates, I do think we have a very profound impact on how the horse can recover. But I don't know that we're ever going to be able to, as farriers, prevent that disease from happening.
Yeah.
I hope I'm wrong, but I think that's an important message I have for most horse owners is everybody spends a lot of time saying, what should I have done differently? And If I
Is
knew the
there
answer to
anything
that, we'd start it. Yeah, we'd already be doing it. So,
management wise, like what are some of the things? Are there
yeah.
things that people, owners should be aware of that maybe
Yeah.
there's a tendency that it could create a potential problem? Like,
Well, again, we're talking about stuff that's outside of my expertise, and I
okay.
hate to resort to giving the same anecdotes that I've been telling people not to. But I will say this: I do think we see a lot of overweight horses, and I do
Yeah.
think we know that just hyperinsulinemia can cause pain and cause laminitis, and I think those are things that I would say caution the owners to keep the sugar contents down, just to see how that's going, and maybe having those horses checked more regularly, I think is might be, and looking at insulin levels and insulin response tests might be a good way of taking horses that are getting borderline and seeing if we can identify that before the symptoms start.
Yeah. Getting back into your realm, your
Yeah.
expertise, what are some of the telltale signs, would you say? How are horses acting,
Oh, with
presenting,
with
if
laminitis.
potentially,
Yeah.
like, what are some things that maybe an owner, if you see X, Y, and Z, this may be a reason to pick up the
Yeah.
phone and call your vet?
Well, I think anytime you start seeing new lameness, new signs of discomfort, reluctance to walk, abnormal gait, a lot of times horses will kind of have that stilted, place their feet very carefully. I would overreact rather than underreact to those, because I think, saying, well, I'm going to wait a few days and see if it gets better, that can have some bad consequences, right? So I understand why people do that, because it's expensive. But I would say starting treatment sooner and involving your veterinarian on that early in the process is probably a really good sign.
Yeah.
I would say one of the patterns that I've experienced a lot, I think, these horses become very painful. The bone, since it's not being well suspended in the foot, tends to, the solar margin of the coffin bone is really sharp. Wish I had a bone out here I could use to illustrate that. But it's designed to hang inside the foot, and instead now it's being supported on the bottom, and it bruises the tissue that's in there. So a lot of times once your horse starts this process, one, we can change the shoes, but that doesn't mean that, if you have a sprained ankle and you change your shoes, even if you put a splint or a cast on there, it's not like you're going to be cured, because you still have damaged tissue inside there that's causing pain. So it's going to take a while for that to resolve. And I found that, we tend to see this pattern of when horses become laminitic, about 4 months later, they go through a secondary abscessing phase that I think can mirror the presentation of laminitis, especially if they present this with both front feet. And I've seen owners go through the period where they say, shoot, we're right back to square one. I'm going to change my team, my vet, my farrier. But a lot of times you have to be aware that the damage that started 4 months ago could be progressing, and then it gets to a point where it turns into an abscess. So it doesn't mean that you're necessarily starting over again. I think frequent radiographs are probably the best way to see what's happening on the inside of this. I'm looking at the inside of how the bone and hoof line up. But it really is, I think, really critically important in these to have a vet and farrier that want to and are willing to and are, happy to work together, because it really has to be a collaborative effort.
Yeah. Anything for owners, like they're going to call the vet, they're going to call the farrier in the short term, that they can do to make a horse comfortable if they believe that they're going through some sort of an episode?
I'm going to stay away from that one. I mean, I
Okay.
do think there's some evidence out there that would suggest that icing is good, but there are also some times where icing and cooling feet can lead to some skin damage and things like that. And there are questions about how to best apply that so that it's actually effective. And I'll stay in my lane on this one and
Okay.
say, yeah, no. The easy answer is no. We're not sure. Like, if we had a great proven method for managing laminitis in the really early developmental phases, we'd all be doing that. But there's a lot of disagreement at different institutions among different clinicians about what's the right way to do it. Do we take shoes off to spread the weight on more evenly? Do we put lily pads on? Do we share the load with impression material on the bottom of the feet? I think all of those could make some sense, but I think they don't necessarily all work for all horses. So
A case by
yeah,
case.
it's a very difficult thing. Laminitis is so multifactorial in terms of the development of it. I think you have to be really careful about treating it like it's a one size fits all kind of
Right.
problem.
Right.
And certainly, I have to say this: be really careful about what you read on the internet.
Okay.
I know there have been, I don't want to identify it by name. There was one, series of posts going on that laminitis is due to imbalance. There's no such thing as, metabolic diseases that cause laminitis. And I actually saw a Horse and Hound put out an article responding to that and pointing out to people that you need to be careful of the misinformation that's on the internet. And I could not agree with that more. I think there's a lot of information on the internet that's just flat out wrong.
Is there a resource that you think is pretty spot on, like to say to people?
No, because none of us know enough about it. It's that is the challenge of it.
Yeah.
It's like
yeah.
There's a quote from Holcomb in the U.S. Department of Agriculture from 1916. The nature of laminitis is such that some cases recover for even the poorest of practitioners, and some horses die even under the best of care.
Right.
That's not an exact quote, but I think I caught the sentiment of that. But you have to be aware of that, right? I mean, you can do all the right things in a laminitis case and still have a horse die. You can do all the wrong things on a laminitis case and they can still get better.
Right.
This is where research and science comes in, is we have to start being able to look at that so that we can identify which one is which.
Okay.
And yes, every time I have a laminitic horse, I'm asking that question of, did that horse get better because of me or in spite of me?
Right.
Did that horse die because of me or in spite of me? It's what drives you to move forward.
Right. This is a total outside of what we're talking about now.
Sure.
You have a pretty good track record for working with farriers and having a collegial sort of relationship. Do you think that's across the board? Like in your experience, you go to a lot of the hoof care summit and different things. Do you think that's pretty much across the board, farriers looking to work with other farriers, or do you think there's a lone wolf quality to the majority?
I think there is I mean, most of us as farriers are sole practitioners, right? So, I shoe a horse, I get back in the truck, I drive away, the owner tells everybody how great it was and calls me back every 6 weeks. Yeah, it's really easy to get caught up in I know what I'm doing and I'm good at this. This is a story I probably told you before, Jude, but I remember setting up conferences. And I remember one specifically. I set up, a conference after the 2000 Athens Olympics. I had Hayden Price come over from Team Great Britain after the Olympics. He was taking care of the dressage horses for Team Great Britain. Dieter Kroner was a farrier taking care of Team Germany's horses. Steve Teachman was a farrier for the U.S. team. I had them all in for a conference, and I thought, this is great. They're all working on sport horses. I'm going to see all they all did things differently.
Yeah.
They're all great farriers.
Yeah.
I wouldn't try to or suggest that any of them change what they're doing.
Right.
But as a young farrier sitting in the room, who the hell do you listen to?
Right.
I mean, I think that's why I get along with a lot of farriers, is because I don't presume to have the answers for everything. And I'd say the only people that I struggle with are the people that pretend to have the answers for everything. And I don't care if that's a vet or a farrier or a trainer. It's just not that simple, and I wish we would stop trying to make it out to be.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add, or you're good?
I think I'm good. I do think we have potential. I think that's what I'll say. We are at a crossroads right now where I think we have all the potential in the world to change this industry and to make inroads in what we're doing. I'm really excited about all the stuff we're doing, and I think I'm excited at the idea of getting farriers back in the academic arena. I can't thank you enough for all the stuff you're doing, Jude. I am so impressed with the journey you've been on, and it's been cool to watch that. So if we could clone that by, a couple thousand more Judes, we'd be in a good spot. No.
If you remember the first weekend, Renata called me poster boy. So
I don't remember that.
Yeah, she called me poster boy, so I took it to heart.
Well, I think there are a lot of different ways. That group, that class, I'm so proud of. I really think, we owe the world to Renata and Tilo for their efforts with this, and Amy Barstow as well. I think there are a lot of people that were involved with this and changed the way I think about what I do. I'd be willing to bet it's changed your way of looking at what you do. Again, if we could get that message out to, 40,000 farriers in North America, I think we'd be onto something.
I mean, we'll just talk about it and then I'll stop. I would say, and you tell me if I'm wrong, it didn't continue at the RVC because of the drivers being Renata and Tilo left.
Yeah.
But do you feel, and this circles back to the initial question, do you feel that that model can exist and can grow insofar as the interest in farriers wanting to participate in that type of a program?
So the way, first of all, I'd say yes. I think it was a terrible shame that that program ended. I mean, I understand all the reasons why. I think there are two things I would throw out there. One is, as a proof of concept, we demonstrated that it can work. I mean, our group published several papers. We have, you know, that was one group of one class in the first one in the United States. Again, expand that out, and I think you could see a tremendous amount of progress and what we could, you know, learn as an industry. And I am very proud of that we did that. I think the trend in education is to actually going away from certain academics and returning different jobs to trades. I think it's going to be a little bit of an uphill battle to take the trade of farriery and turn it into an academic profession. But there does seem to be an interest in this. I think it is relatively nice right now because I think the potential for remote learning, one good thing that came out of the pandemic is we all came, you know, very comfortable learning off of a computer screen and a Zoom program or something like that. So I do think we could turn around now, and we've demonstrated that there's a potential for this. Now what we have to find is a dance partner, and that's why I'm at Rowan, is because I really do think that this is why I'm here, is to see if we can make that happen. Maybe it is true, and I wondered this aloud. I hope Rowan's not listening to this, but my frustration is that from an academic point of view, I don't know that the veterinary community has been supportive of farriers in academia and of this being an academic event. I think that's going to be a hard thing to change, is the perception of that. And I struggle at times wondering if perhaps instead of what I'm trying to do here, which is doing this and gaining academic credibility through a vet school, maybe this is going to require that we do this as our separate independent path. But I think we'll get there. I mean, doing this and offering these as degrees outside of vet teaching institutions, but doing this in other ways might end up having to be a necessary part of this for us. But farriers are going to have to drive this if that's the case. And I hope we're starting to see enough support from farriers across all types of different beliefs and disciplines. I mean, people in the foraging worlds, you know, like Austin Edens and Grant Moon are taking an interest in this. We're seeing farriers all across the, you know, with all these different interests, trying to take their life experiences of what they learned and put it in the form of a study, and now we can build and move off of it. That's the value of it. I think we might have to get there on our own if we can't rely on other groups to do this for us.